Better late than never. It's Browns Insider. It's a Wednesday night on cleveland.com. I'm Dan Labbe, Mary Kay Cabot, and Branson Wright. And we're going to start tonight's show off by talking about Isaiah Crowell, limited in practice. No, we're going to talk quarterbacks. Brian Hoyer named the starter today. Personally, I was a little surprised. Everything seemed to be pointing to Johnny Manziel. What did you think?
Well, I was surprised too. I really was, because after the game, it seemed like all signs were pointing to Johnny Manziel. But a funny thing happens overnight when guys come back and watch the film.
Yeah.
Things seem to always seem so much better than they were on film. And I think they looked at it and they thought, you know what? There were a lot of issues. There's miscommunication with Josh Gordon. A lot of things happened here and there. They got themselves, there were holding calls, that they were in 3rd and long. And I think they kind of took a little bit of the heat off Brian after that game. And I think that there were a lot of things that went into this decision, including guys like Joe Thomas saying, hey, you know what? If you turn this team over to a rookie, you're basically saying we are playing for next year. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think that all of that went into the hopper.
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, I was surprised also. I thought everything pointed to Johnny playing. And in fact, I mean, they brought him in to change the tempo of the game, which he did. But I understand the move. And as you said, what Joe Thomas said about maybe giving up on the season, which I don't take it that far, but you have a veteran quarterback who is 7-5. You're still in the playoff hunt. So I guess in their mind, to give Hoyer a chance to correct himself. I mean, early in the year when you asked us who was the best quarterback in the division, and I gave it to Hoyer. But these past few weeks, it hasn't been the case. But back to the Johnny decision. Not surprised, or I should say I understand, but it's something that I don't agree with. I thought they should have went with Manziel.
How much of a role do you think the locker room played in this? Because you go back to the Atlanta game, and there were a lot of guys that were still supporting Brian Hoyer after that. They struggled, but he led that game-winning drive, and there were still a lot of guys who were behind him. And we've talked about this a little bit. You've said over and over again, these are professionals. They want to win. But how much of a role do you think the locker room played?
Well, I do think that Joe Thomas's words carry a lot of weight. When you're a 7-time Pro Bowler and you talk to him and he tells you that, hey, you know what, to us that's going to look like you're giving up on the season, I do think that means a lot. So I don't think it was the determining factor, but I do think that it had something to do with it. I mean, if they were right on the fence and Joe says something like that, you can't risk losing your locker room.
Yeah.
You cannot risk losing your team at a time like this. I will say, however, that I've talked to guys like Billy Wynn, and I wrote that for today, where he, of course he was like, we are firmly behind Brian, but hey, there's something about this Johnny football too, and there's plenty of guys that do feel that way. It's a professional locker room. They would have been fine either way. I really do believe that. But I do think that Mike Pettin probably took into account what Joe said.
Yeah, and you go back to the offseason, Branson, too. There were people before the Browns even drafted Johnny Manziel. I know Josh Gordon went on ESPN and talked about the kind of electricity that Johnny Manziel brings. Joe Hayden has kind of been on the Johnny Manziel bandwagon for a while. So there is that level of intrigue with these guys, even kind of that weird dynamic where they can back Brian Hoyer, but they can also be very intrigued about what Johnny Manziel brings.
I think it is, and I don't know if you noticed in the game, when he came in, it seemed like there was a different tempo from the guys, more of a pep in their step when he came in there. I mean, I look at it as a relief pitcher. You have your starter in there, he's not doing so well. You bring in the relief pitcher, and he's throwing 95 miles an hour, and it kind of gets the defense, as far as baseball, get them ready. So I think that was the case in that game. But again, back to his decision, it's, hey, we got this veteran guy, let's go with him and ride it out. But I say it'll be a short leash. I think if Hoyer doesn't play well in the first half, I think you could see Johnny come back in the game.
And it is going to be an interesting environment, Mary Kay, because Brian Hoyer goes out there and he overthrows a couple guys or does throw an early pick. All of a sudden, that hometown story kind of goes out the window. The hometown fans are going to be making the money sign and calling for Johnny Manziel.
Yeah, it's going to be a very tough environment, but we have seen Brian Hoyer with his back against the wall this year come up big in situations where they really needed him to, not the least of which was the Atlanta Falcons game where he had thrown 3 interceptions, his chin was on the ground, and guys had to pick him up, And to come back and do what he did in that game was pretty remarkable. His back is up against the wall once again, and I actually think he's going to come out fighting and do pretty well. This is a defense. This is not, they led the league with 46 sacks last week. That was a very attacking defense, a 4-3, the kind of defense that Brian and the line, they haven't fared that well against. You shut down the run. I mean, we know the formula. But, you know, they may be able to have a little bit more success this week against the Colts. However, let's keep in mind, no Miles Austin, kidney laceration, no Gary Barnidge, rib injury of some sort. And you know what? Those two guys were a very big part of this offense.
Yeah, we've seen Brian Hoyer kind of, every quarterback really, they kind of get that safety blanket. And Gary Barnidge had sort of become that. Miles Austin had made some big catches. And like you said, he's going to be without those guys. And at the same time, we saw all that miscommunication with Josh Gordon in Buffalo.
Oh, he was so frustrated with that. But, you know, but back to Hoyer, his agent, I think he's in the position now, if they're going to make the money now. Now, here he is, his back's against the wall, and he's been through this part all season long, and here's his opportunity to step up. And if he can win this game and step up from some of the bad games he's had, then I don't know if he'll get the 10 to 14 million that he wants, but certainly the conversation will get going again.
Johnny Manziel, what does it say about him? Does it say anything about him that they didn't go to him as far as him being ready, as far as his preparation? Does this say anything about the trust level that they have in Manziel?
Well, you know what? I think they looked at that game too. And in the light of day, the next day, again, you look at that film, and the scintillating drive was great. 80 yards, touchdown, but I think they looked at that and they thought, okay, prevent defense. Let's not get overly excited about that. Softer coverage. They were behind by a significant amount at that point. And then also, when they look at the fumble, I think that had them very concerned about, is he going to be able to know the snap count? We've talked to a number of guys on the team that have said, hey, even Travis Benjamin was saying, you know, hey, if Johnny doesn't pronounce something right, we'll help him pronounce it, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, here you have, we're not even 100% certain that Nick McDonald is going to start this game, although I think he probably will. But, I mean, can you imagine a scenario in which you have a first-time starter at center and a first-time rookie quarterback starting? So I think they had to be very careful about that, because even if Nick McDonald does start the game, it doesn't mean he's going to be able to finish it. But I think that exchange maybe left them a little bit concerned about just the overall operation of the offense.
Should there be overall concern, Branson, if we're this far into the season? And I know Johnny Manziel, he's probably been running the scout team, and he hasn't been getting the reps that a first teamer would get. But should there be some concern that maybe this coaching staff doesn't appear, at least, to be ready to trust him?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, he is a rookie, and I think it came to a point where it was just to sit him down, and if the Browns, I almost called them the Cavs, if the Browns got out of it early, that, to get him in and get some reps. But the fact that they're still in it, it's a good problem to have in their mind. They're still in it. They have the rookie quarterback. He can watch and learn. But I think, again, if you go to this game and Hoyer doesn't play well early, then I think you could see the hook and you see the rookie back in the game.
Yeah, do you agree that there'll be a relatively short leash for Hoyer now?
Well, you know what? Yeah, not only that, but I also think that Johnny showed enough in the red zone. I mean, look what he did. Brian had gone 1 for 9 in the red zone in 2 games. Johnny comes in and scores a touchdown, not with his arm, but with his leg. So he brings that added dimension. So I do think that in addition to a shorter leash for Brian, I also think that the Johnny package comes back into play, right? So I think that there is a much greater chance that you will see him in the red zone so that they can try to score some points, or that you'll see him somewhere so that they can try to generate something. Now, maybe not early on. If they're going along fine, then maybe they won't go to it. But if they need a jump start now, they know that they can get it from him, and Chuck Pagano is certainly preparing for it.
And we saw it in Buffalo. We saw it in the preseason. Johnny Manziel in the red zone is incredibly dangerous. There's so many things he can do. And maybe before this week you say, look, Brian Hoyer is your starter. You don't take him out when he drives the team all the way to the red zone. But now I think he's kind of lost that benefit of the doubt at this point, at the very least. He hasn't lost the starting job, but he's certainly lost the benefit of the doubt.
And I was going to ask you, Mary Kay, do you think that no matter how well Hoyer plays, that a Johnny package could come into play in this game?
Yeah, I do. I really do think so because when you look at the numbers, there's been only, again, one touchdown pass in the last 15 quarters,
Right.
none in the last 9, and then that 1 for 9 in the red zone. Third down has been a horrible issue, right? He's the last in the league on third down, and there have been accuracy issues. So absolutely 100%, I do think that there will be Johnny plays, especially because of what he showed he could do in this past game and the enthusiasm. Mike Pettin always talks about pumping up the volume in the stadium. They control the volume. What's the best way to control the volume in that stadium? Throw Johnny Manziel in the game.
Yeah, there would certainly be a buzz around that. If we saw it against New Orleans, we saw it against Baltimore. It didn't work, but it definitely created a buzz when even in Buffalo, when number 2 came out, it created a buzz in that stadium. So one of the things that this team has accomplished, I think, with Brian Hoyer is they kind of know what they have in him right now. Is that safe to say that they know what they have in Hoyer now and kind of long term?
Well, I think what they need to find out, as Mary Kay talked about, a guy who's had his back against the wall in several games and he's come back.
Yeah.
This is going to be a good test for him. What is he going to do? I mean, I always go back to baseball. Old relief pitcher told me, it's not what you do when you're doing well. What do you do when you get knocked around a little bit? Well, Hoyer's getting knocked around right now. So how is he going to react to that? And if he's talking about getting, $10, $14 million, he's going to have to prove that, especially on Sunday.
Well, I think the thing to consider here, too, with Brian Hoyer is, they do have to make a decision. He has to make a decision, and so do the Browns. I think it's pretty evident now that Johnny Manziel is their quarterback of the future, that's what they are grooming him for. Now, is that going to work out long term? Nobody knows that. But they are going to go that route. So Brian has to make a decision. He and his agent have to decide, do we want to come back here and try to beat Johnny Manziel out for the job, or do you want to go somewhere else where right off the bat someone will probably look at your 10-5, 11-5, whatever it turns out to be record, and say, you know what, we think we can win with this guy. So it's going to be, what does the market bear? What does he think he can get out there? But the bottom line is, Johnny Manziel is going to get his chance in a Cleveland Browns uniform. He's going to get his chance, and it's going to be pretty soon.
Brian Hoyer has taken a little bit of heat for some of his comments, fair or unfair. Have either of you had an issue with what he said? Because let's face it, this is a guy who kind of is in his dream job, is kind of hanging on the precipice of losing it, and also costing himself millions and millions of dollars. I mean, there's going to be a little bit of tension there when he's asked about that. Did either of you have a problem with anything he said?
No, I like my quarterbacks to be confident. And he certainly was confident and I think honest on how he felt about the situation. And he's a veteran quarterback. He's been around. He's not the rookie. He's not the guy trying to make an impression as Johnny is. So, what he said, no problem with that at all. And as reporters, we love honesty, and we always ask for it. And then when the players give it to us, some people criticize them. But, I like it.
Yeah, you know what? I agree 100%. I think he's handled this great. I mean, he comes out. The minute we walked into the locker room on Monday, there he was standing there ready to talk, and he had gotten benched the day before. So that's pretty cool that you're willing to come out and be there. So that's number one. And then, again, he was completely honest. The only thing that I would have toned down a little bit is the part about Josh Gordon and saying, that was his fault on the interception. Now, we all know that if you tell us that there was a miscommunication between you and Josh, you were thinking one thing and he was thinking another, we know who got it wrong. The quarterback doesn't get that wrong on a miscommunication, okay? That's never the case. So we can read between the lines, and you don't really need to say it quite like that. But I think you can also accurately, reflect that, look, Josh Gordon's been out for 10 games. Like he did today.
Yeah.
He came out today and he said, I'm working really, really hard with him, but you know what? We still need to get our mojo down.
And that's kind of what the decision does now. It kind of takes Brian Hoyer from being defensive and trying to make his case for the job to, all right, at least for this week, I'm the starting quarterback. I don't have to defend myself. I don't have to go after Josh Gordon. I don't have to make my case anymore. I can just approach this like the starting quarterback trying to beat the Indianapolis Colts. Let's move on to some other things. And you mentioned Miles Austin, a guy who has sort of come out of nowhere. A lot of people weren't sure what to expect out of him, and he's made big catch after big catch for this team. Even against Atlanta, when he had some costly drops, he came out and made a big catch again. What is not having Miles Austin going to do to this receiving corps?
You look at me, Mary Kay. I mean, I'm sure we agree with this. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt them not having him, as you said, those catches. But man, the injuries continue to pile up for this team. Just think if everybody was healthy, how good this team would be and the depth that they would have. But this is just another big blow to the team, especially to the receivers.
You know what, I think it's something like, and Tom used this stat the other day, and I can't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head, but the vast majority of his 47 catches have gone for first downs. And every time you look up, and I ran into Miles at a charity function a week ago, and I said, Miles, every time I look up, there you are in the middle of the field, catching the ball in traffic for a first down. And you know what, I mean, it's really so true that he's kind of been unheralded and underrated this season for what he's been able to accomplish. I think people viewed him as sort of being perhaps, maybe a little bit washed up or whatever the case may be.
I thought he was done.
Yeah,
and he didn't really do anything in the preseason either.
Yeah,
Right.
and look what he's been able to do. So, I mean, well wishes go out to him because it's very serious to have a lacerated kidney. And, here's hoping that he's fine and wishing him a speedy recovery.
Yeah, and there was that moment against Buffalo where he kind of ran short of the sticks on fourth down. I mean, Zell threw it to him, ended up being a turnover on downs, and it was shocking. Like, Miles Austin doesn't do that. He's always where he needs to be, like you said, to convert that first down and make those big catches. Isaiah Crowell also a little banged up. What can you tell us about him, Mary Kay?
Well, he was limited today, and that's a little bit of a concern because, as we know, Terrence West is a little bit in the doghouse right now, and Mike Pettin was really hard on him the other day. He was really hard on him. They're not going to stand for that. They're not going to stand for turning the ball over, which is the major reason that Brian Hoyer is in the situation that he's in right now. When he wasn't turning the ball over, he was in good graces, in good standing, and everything was fine. Once you start throwing one touchdown against 6 interceptions in your last 3 games, that's when you start to get the coaching staff saying, "Ooh, I don't know about this." And the same thing has happened with Terrence West. So Isaiah Crowell, a little bit limited right now, but we'll have to see how it goes as the week goes on.
Do you think this coaching staff will trust Terrence West, or are we going to see Glenn Winston?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to. And when we look at the success of Brian Hoyer, it's when the running game is successful. I mean, he really needs that running game to do well. And then especially now, with Austin out, it's going to be paramount that running game is working well. So, they're going to have to trust the guys that are there. And if the best way for West to get out of the doghouse is to really have a big game against the Colts.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. They're not a great run defense, so maybe you can do a little something against them. And let's face it, you want to keep the ball out of Andrew Luck's hands. That's one of the formulas for beating the Colts. You don't want Andrew Luck throwing 5 touchdown passes against you. And if Isaiah Crowell's out there running the football, obviously that makes it a whole lot easier. If he's healthy, can he bounce back? He averaged, I think, 1.9 yards a carry last week. That's a very good Buffalo Bills defense. Can he bounce back?
Well, again, I think that they will go into this game attempting to shut down the run because they know that if you take Brian's run away from him, you take his play action away from him, and things start to fall apart. So I'm sure that that's where Chuck Pagano will go with his game plan, and then they'll try to make Brian beat them with his arm, and he hasn't been accurate. He has not been that accurate, obviously. He's the least accurate quarterback in the NFL right now. And again, with Miles Austin and Gary Barnidge out, it gets even more difficult. So who has to step up this week? Well, a couple guys, but Josh Gordon. He's got to be ready for this game. He's got to study. He's got to know where to run on a sight adjustment against the blitz. I mean, he's got to be able to come through where Miles Austin won't be able to and where a guy like Gary Barnidge won't be able to.
Yeah, it's his time to shine. And, he has to step up. And the only, number of criticisms I have for Hoyer, and I think sometimes he looks at Josh too much or too long and just kind of focus in on him. He's going to have to look away a little bit more. But having said that, he's going to be the guy that has to step up. So if he can pass the ball around, and I think Josh will be open.
Mm-hmm. The other guy that needs to step up. We know Joe Hayden has been very good of late, but across from Joe Hayden, whether it's Buster Screen or Justin Gilbert, whoever ends up over there against this Indy receiving core, they're going to be tested.
Oh my goodness. I mean, well, first of all, we know that they lead the league with 31.8 points per game. I mean, really think about that. They have scored 40 points or more on, I don't know how many occasions. I was counting it up. It's 4 or 5 occasions. So, they're a scoring machine. And again, like you said, Buster Screen, Joe Hayden. Joe Hayden's been playing really well.
Yeah.
He should be able to come through. But boy, this will test the secondary for sure. And they don't have Tayshaun Gibson back there. And Jim Leonard stepped in and did a really nice job. Obviously got an interception, and that was huge. But you're going to miss Tayshaun in a game like this.
Back to those injuries. Just so many injuries they have to deal with.
Yeah, and they've got to deal with Reggie Wayne, T.Y. Hilton, all kinds of weapons on that Indianapolis offense. And, kind of speaking of Buster Screen, we keep talking about injuries piling up and the next man up, but I mean, let's be honest, it wasn't supposed to be Buster Screen as that number 2 cornerback. That's not why they drafted Justin Gilbert. And that's been another thing that this defense has had to deal with. Buster Screen kind of playing where he's not supposed to be. It's been really impressive. At the end of this year, no matter how it turns out, we'll look back on this defense and kind of wonder how they were able to hold together.
I mean, you can go back, last year or 2 years, when was the Dallas game, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And he looked horrible. I mean, I didn't even know Buster Screen belonged in this league, the way he had played
And to give him
the past
credit,
2
he's
years.
gotten better over the last few years.
Absolutely, absolutely. He's improved, he's gotten better, he's taken his lumps, and he's not in an elite corner, but I think he's a serviceable guy right now. But he's going to have his hands full Sunday.
Well, the thing that has, eased the sting of Justin Gilbert not being really ready to play at this level is K'Wan Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, K'Wan, I don't know where they would be. That when you said we get to the end of the season and we wonder, that will be the answer. It was K'Wan that came in there and saved them. Because I'll tell you what, we would be hammering away way more on Justin Gilbert if it was not for K'Wan.
A couple of former Browns coming back to Cleveland, and some interesting things to say. Trent Richardson saying if he gets in the end zone, he's going to jump in the dog pound. He's only scored 3 touchdowns this season.
Not a good
How is
idea.
that going to end?
Not a good idea. Now, if you just said Josh Cribbs jumping in the end zone, I could see that a little bit. But no, Trent Richardson, if he gets in there, I would advise him not to jump into the dog pound. I mean, don't do that.
Josh Cribbs, of course, the topic's going to come up because the Browns have struggled so much in the return game.
What return game?
Yeah, exactly. What return game? And still, they really never showed an interest in Cribbs. And look, no one knew what Cribbs was going to do. And he hasn't been great in Indianapolis. He's had a couple returns. But do you think they maybe regret not taking a look at Cribbs based on what they've seen?
I don't know if they regret it or not, but I do really strongly feel that they should have signed Cribbs, not only for what he would have brought to the table in terms of the return game, and also, on coverage. I mean, we've all seen those tackles, and they've had so many injuries at key positions that, you're starting even to run out of your guys to make those tackles on the coverage teams. But just from an emotional standpoint, an intensity standpoint, I think he would have brought to the special teams what you get from a Dante Whitner on defense, or a Carlos Dansby on defense, or, a Brian Hoyer, or some of these guys on offense. I just think that they could have used that little bit of oomph on special teams right now.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't sign him. Maybe they didn't want to have guys from other regimes, or not as many guys from previous regimes, but what would have hurt if you just rented him for 1 year, because right now that's a glaring weakness they have in their return game. And if they could have had somebody like Cribbs, and at least he could have, helped the next guy, or whoever the next young guy would have been to replace him.
Yeah.
But it would just been beneficial if they had him in there.
Especially with your offense struggling so much. Do you think I don't want to say off the field, but Cribbs has been a guy who's been outspoken in the locker room, and he's been a guy that unfairly or fairly has kind of been viewed as a all about Josh Cribbs guy. Do you think that played a role maybe in the Browns and other teams staying away from him?
Yeah, you know what, first of all, he was 31, and this isn't a team that, really generally wants to go out and sign guys that are over 30. But once again, it could have been a 1-year proposition.
Not even a yearly. 6 games.
Right.
6 games, absolutely. I think it would have. I think it could have been the thing that pushes them over the top to get field position. And he was talking about that today.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I bring field position to the team, and they really do need that. Now, the defense has provided it. That's where they've gotten their field position that they haven't gotten on those returns from all the takeaways that they've gotten. But you know what? I think he would have provided a tremendous boost for them, and now he could very well come back and haunt them in a game that really could cost them going to the playoffs. And we haven't even talked about that.
Yeah.
They are in the thick of it right now. I don't care what anybody says. They are still very much in it.
Oh yeah, with Baltimore losing last week, Pittsburgh losing last week, they're still right there. They don't have a lot of tiebreakers working in their favor.
Right.
This is an enormous game on that front as well, being an AFC game. But they still have Cincinnati on the schedule. They still have Baltimore on the schedule. So.
And Baltimore's at Miami, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that could shake up. So it's going to be a big game, and I'm looking forward to it. And you have more than Cribbs and Richardson coming back. I mean, DeQuell coming back.
Mike Adams,
yeah,
Pops.
Pops,
We'll
got
see
Pops coming.
again.
So,
So there's a lot of
yeah.
guys that have something to prove. Trent has something to prove. You know, I don't know if he'll actually be able to pull it off. But look, hey, guys that we have never even heard of. You know, guys that we've never even heard of have
Right.
come in here and run for 127 yards, or rookies,
true.
you know,
Yes.
Kennard Robinson. So, you know, I mean, Trent's going to have, you know, this, he did. He said he's going to play this like it's his last game.
And I love the honesty. You know, guys, oh, it's just another game. Oh, you know, all this kind of stuff. But no, he's motivated.
To which I got tweets from Indianapolis fans saying, we hope it is his last game. So,
That's funny.
One last thing we got to talk about. It's an unfortunate thing in December in a playoff chase, but it appears the Browns have a little bit of a kicking problem right now. They did apparently try out a couple of kickers this week, but what is Billy Cundiff's future right now?
you know what? I haven't even gotten a chance to talk to him this week. There's been so much going on, obviously, with the quarterbacks. But yeah, I mean that's a tough situation with Billy, and it's not going to get any easier with, I mean, the wind and the weather. You know, these are two huge home games back to back, and you're talking about, well, of course, but there have been snapping issues and things like that that have not helped, but if they're looking at kickers that they're finding things on tape they're not happy about.
And then the last game is in Baltimore, and the weather could be, not as bad as here, but against his former team, and the reason why they got rid of him because of missing kicks, and that will be interesting if it comes down to that. That could be his last game with the Browns.
Yeah, we'll see what they do in that kicking game, and I'm sure they will hope that it's not going to cost them anything moving forward. But we know in the NFL, so many close games, and of course the Browns this year, so many close games, and it kind of has hit some big ones, but he's also missed some big ones throughout his career. All right, that'll do it for Browns Insider, our Brian Hoyer, Johnny Manziel edition. For Branson Wright and Mary Kay Cabot, I'm Dan Labbe. Thanks for watching.